Order. Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to our Audit Committee meeting on April 26, 2023. I will now call on Will Short, Regional Clerk, to conduct. I'm on mute? Oh, sorry. Oh no, it says mute up there. Okay. There we go. Okay, thank you. No problem. Okay, call to order. Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to our Audit Committee meeting on April 26, 2023. I will now call on Will Short, Regional Clerk, to conduct roll call.
Thank you, Chair Redmond.
Present.
Councillor Erb.
Present.
Councillor James.
Present.
Councillor Harris.
Present.
And Councillor Deutschmann.
Present.
Thank you, Chair.
For Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair Deutschmann.
Okay. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements, and their contributions to our community. Okay. Next, are there any declarations of interest? No? Okay, thank you. No presentations? Okay, and now reports. So I'll call on Craig Dyer to introduce the report, and Craig will introduce Tricia and Matthew Batik. Sorry, does Tricia have a last name?
Tricia Alpa.
Tricia Alpa and Matthew Batik and Courtney Cheel to provide the presentation. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you to the Chair and welcome to members of the Audit Committee. The purpose of today's meeting is to review, consider, and hopefully approve the financial statements of the region of Waterloo for the period ended December 31st, 2022. There are two reports and three statements on your agenda today. The main order item of business is item 5.1, which is the consolidated financial statements of the region of Waterloo. And also included in that report are the sinking fund statements and trust fund statements. They'll all be covered off in one motion. And then there's also an information report with respect to the region of Waterloo Community Housing Incorporated. This for us is the, I guess, the culmination of a long, challenging and detailed process that started several months ago. It's always a major undertaking to put these statements together. It's a very important part of the work that our Treasury Services team does for the region. And so speaking to the statements today, with us here is Tricia Alpa, our Manager of Financial Services. And in a moment, I'll ask Tricia to walk you through the highlights of the report. Also present are Matthew Batik and Courtney Cheel from KPMG, the region's external auditor appointed by Audit Committee and Council last year. And you'll recall we met with them back in December to do the audit planning work just before Christmas. And so with that, I'll ask Tricia to provide a brief summary of the financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2022. Thank you.
Good afternoon to the Chair and members of the Audit Committee. We're pleased to be presenting the audited consolidated financial statements of the region, as well as the audited financial statements of the Sinking Fund and Sunnyside Trust Fund as appended in the report. The Municipal Act requires the annual preparation of financial statements in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles for local governments as required by the Public Sector Accounting Board. These financial statements were audited by the region's external auditor, KPMG, and each have a clean audit opinion. KPMG representatives will speak in more detail to that in their presentation. Subject to Audit Committee and Council approval, signed versions of the financial statements will be produced following the Regional Council approval on May the 24th. Highlights of the region's 2022 consolidated financial statements include stable liquidity, noting that while the cash balance at the end of the year has decreased, investments have increased to take advantage of the rising interest rates. Increased deferred revenue as development charge collections were very strong due to the increased building permit issuances. Stable net long-term liabilities as the region's own purpose debt has maintained in the $700 million range for the last 3 years, from carefully planning which projects will be debt financed. There's also been continued overall low debt servicing costs due to lower interest debt being issued in recent years. The future liabilities included landfill post-closure costs, employee future benefit liabilities, sick leave and liabilities, and WSIB. Explanations for each are set out in the report. The funding of these liabilities will be from future property taxes and general municipal revenues. Overall, the reserve and reserve fund balances have increased modestly, mainly due to the timing of completion of certain capital works. The region's consolidated surplus for 2022 as presented in these financial statements is $113 million, which differs considerably from the year-end operating budget position of $7.2 million, reported on April the 4th, due to the Public Sector Accounting Board presentation requirements, which includes the recognition of grant revenue immediately, the elimination of transfers to the reserve and reserve funds, and the consolidation of ROCI and the sinking fund. The sinking fund financial statement report, it's an actuarial surplus of $3.1 million. The purpose of this fund is to retire sinking fund debentures issued by the region. A sinking fund debenture has the entire principal amount repayable at maturity. Contributions are made to the sinking fund over the life of the debenture, which along with the related investment income are used to pay the principal at maturity. The trust fund financial statements are required under the provisions of the Long-Term Care Homes Act of 2007. To maintain and manage trust funds on behalf of the residents of Sunnyside Home. Resident receipts were significantly higher in 2022 due to an increase in the number of resident admissions related to the lifting of COVID pandemic restrictions and a corresponding increase in disbursements as residents accessed more personal care services and activities. Region staff are present and would be pleased to answer any questions from the committee members, and I'll hand the floor back to the chair.
Thank you for your presentation. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Wasn't quite clear if the consolidated reserve of $113 million, does that include all of the reserve funds? Or the consolidated surplus was $113,000, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So that includes the elimination of those transfers to the reserve and reserve funds. That's what the standard requires.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Could I just have a quick explanation on that accounting difference that occurs? I remember as mayor 10 years ago trying to understand that, and it was like sticking things in our eyes to try to understand how 7 million is 113 million, that sort of thing. So I was just curious if there was is there a quick and easy explanation for that or something, Craig?
Through the chair, I wish there was. The closest I can get, I think, is to point you to the reconciliation of the two surplus figures. It's in the agenda. It's on page 30 of 101. Basically shows how we get from the region's surplus, which is essentially our year-end position with respect to property tax and user rate revenues and the expenditure associated with that. And what PSAB, the Public Sector Advisory Board, that's not quite the right word, Public Sector Accounting Board, thank you. What the Public Sector Accounting Board uses in order to have a consistent measure of surplus across all municipalities and actually other levels of government as well. So there's a series of adjustments that we need to make with respect to reserves and reserve funds, with respect to certain expenses. For example, capital cost amortization. We don't budget for capital cost amortization when we're doing our annual budget. It's a paper entry, for lack of a better term, that we need to show on our audited statements, but it doesn't affect the tax levy. And so we need to make basically a series of adjustments to get us from the surplus relating to the tax levy to the surplus that's required by PSAB. Not a great answer, but maybe the best I can do at this point.
But PSAB was brought on by the Ontario, was it the Ontario government that brought that on to try to have some method of assessing all municipalities on some sort of same basis?
Yes, it's been a requirement for some time now in the Municipal Act that municipalities must use PSAB standards when preparing their audited financial statements.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. So we'll now have a motion. Oh, sorry. Oh, before we do all that, my apologies. I'll now go to Matthew Batik and Courtney Cheel. Hello, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. So unfortunately, I have no voice. So Court's going to do most of the presentation. But I want to sort of reiterate the comments that Tricia made around the fact that we do have clean audit opinions, and that is a good thing. There are a couple other highlights from the presentation that also point in a good direction for the region. And just before I sort of close off, and I'll pause and take any questions later, I want to thank Tricia and the rest of her team for the cooperation and assistance we got throughout the audit. It was excellent, and we couldn't have asked for anything more, so we appreciate that. Court?
Thanks, Matt. So what I'll do is I'll start on our audit highlights page. So that is page 56 of the package, right there, perfect. So the status of the audit is we are substantially done. I will go through more detail of the status on slide 6. There has been no significant changes to our audit plan from when we did report this in December. For our audit risks and results, I will go into more detail about these and any other areas of focus. Uncorrected audit misstatements, we are happy to report that there were no uncorrected audit misstatements this year, which is great. And there was only one small corrected audit misstatement, which was a classification between assets and liabilities. There were no significant unusual transactions, and there was no matters to report for accounting policies and practices, which are great. And we are also happy to report that there are no significant deficiencies to report. If you go to the next page. So this page, I won't go into detail about, but it just highlights the new technology that we are using within our audits. On the next page, so this is our status of the audit. So as of today, we are still completing our final quality control and review procedures. We are quite close to being finished. We do need to receive 8 legal letter responses, and the reason why we haven't received these is because we need to have these dated as close as we can to the audit report, so we'll receive these later on at the end of May. We have to complete our discussions with you, the audit committee, as well as obtain evidence of council's approval of the financial statements and receipt of the signed management representation letter. We don't believe there will be any issues with completing these outstanding items. On the next page, so this is our significant risk that we had in the audit. We only had one, and it's management override of controls. Essentially, this risk relates to a fraud risk where even if the entity had the best controls in place, management can always override these controls. And so this risk is in every single audit that we perform. And for the region, this risk is quite low, we believe. Based on the work that we did perform, we didn't identify any issues. On the next slide. So I'll go through some other areas of focus. The first one is post-employment benefits. So this would include sick leave as well and WSIB. As we noted in our audit plan, post-employment benefits was another area of focus due to it being an estimate, and it includes significant judgment from management and management specialists. Based on our procedures performed, we didn't identify any issues. On the next slide is tangible capital assets. And the reason for this being another area of focus is purely because of the dollar value of the balance. At year end, the net book value was $3.8 billion. So based on our procedures, which did include sampling of vouching to support for additions and looking at retirements of assets, we did not find any issues. Next page. So this is our last other area of focus, which is the obligatory reserve fund revenue and deferred revenue. The reason this is an area of focus is due to the revenue recognized from development charges is subject to judgment, as it has to be growth related in nature. And as well as the other ones, based on our procedures, we didn't identify any issues. The next page. So as mentioned, there is no uncorrected audit misstatements, and there was only one small $2.7 million corrected audit misstatement. That was a classification between accounts payable and receivables. Okay, the next page. So this page goes over control deficiencies. So through our audit, we review internal controls over the financial reporting process. And if there is any deficiencies that are significant, we are required to report these to you. We are happy to note that there is no significant deficiencies. Okay, the next page. So the only thing that I'll go through on this page is the second point. And this is just noting that in 2023, the region will have to adopt 2 new accounting standards. So the first one is asset retirement obligations, and the second one is financial instruments. So the asset retirement obligation, this relates to setting up a liability for the legal obligation associated with retiring an asset. And so you would have to record a liability, and then it also increases that specific tangible capital asset. For the financial instruments, the main impact to the region is that the investments will be recorded at fair value and not at cost anymore. And then additionally, there is a new statement on the financial statements called remeasurement gains and losses, which would track the fair value changes. Okay, the next page. So this page goes over, discusses how we deliver audit quality, and just notes that this remains our highest priority. On the next page, we do note 5 audit quality indicators that we do track for the region. The main one that I would like to point out is the timing of prepared by client working papers and items and support. And we did all the PBC items that we did receive were received in a very timely manner and in high quality. So thank you, Tricia, for that. On the next page and the remaining pages is our appendices. I won't go into any further detail of those, but they are there for your information. So now if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Any questions? No? You did an excellent job.
Perfect.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cheel and Mr. Betik.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So now we'll have a motion. We'll now have a motion from report COR TRY 23-014, financial statements for the fiscal year ending December 31, 2022. Can I have a mover and seconder? Councillor James moved, Councillor Erb seconded. Thank you. Please use the yes or no button to vote. No, Mr. Harris, you have to use the yes or no button to vote. He moved in favor. Everybody's good? Yeah, me too. Carried. Thank you. 5-0. Okay, another motion that the Regional Municipality of Waterloo approve the attached consolidated financial statements. Is that correct?
That's the one you just did.
Oh, is that the one we just did? Yep. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. I always like to repeat. Carried. Okay, now moving on to 5.2, I will call on Craig Dyer to introduce the report.
Thank you.
Information.
Thank you. Through the chair, just a brief information report for Audit Committee outlining the results, the financial results of the Region of Waterloo Community Housing Inc., which is a wholly owned corporation, wholly owned by the Region of Waterloo that operates housing at 2 different locations. We provide an annual financial statement for what we refer to as ROCI. And as indicated earlier, that statement is part of the consolidated statements that were approved in the previous motion. So there for you for information, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dyer. Any questions? No? Okay. So the report is received for information. No correspondence. Any other business? No, thank you. Next meeting to be determined. And mover and seconder to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Erb, seconded by Councillor James. Please use the yes or no button to vote. All right, that's passed. Thank you. Carried. All right, that's a wrap. Thank you, thank you. And I note I didn't get the light blue jacket treatment from Will today.